Hey developers, today we're back with another Spring Boot tutorial. Today we're going to look at how to add a basic test to our class here. And we're also going to take a look at how to add some hotkeys and a few minor fixes. So let's begin. So first I want to say, in my last video you saw, let's go ahead and run this. So we can go to run, or we can use some hotkeys, but let's run. Just click run here, do basic application, and it's going to go ahead and run. And if we open up our browser here, I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. You can see, hi Eric, fancy text. You can see it's a little small, but we know that it's definitely working. Now last time, before I was stopping and restarting the server over and over again, you probably noticed that there is one easier way of doing this. So if you go into your Maven file, your POM file, excuse me, there is something called Spring Boot Dev Tools. So you can just add this dependency right here. And once you add this dependency, it'll Spring, or actually Intelij, will ask you to install the plugin. Once the plugin is installed, it'll actually do an automatic re-refresh for you every time the app is changed. And the way that works, so right here, you can see here, the app is running. If I go back into, let's say, my fancy writer, and I put fancy text, let's say I add a 1 at the end, I can save it. Now if I save it, nothing happens. So if I go back up to here, it still looks the same. But if I go to run and go to compile, or actually build project, and then I reload it, you can see now I see the 1. So all you have to do is build the project over again, and then it'll appear. So you don't have to stop and restart the server and over again, which that's a nice little trick. So just add the Spring Dev Tools to the POM file, and then make sure you just build, and it'll do it for you. I think in Eclipse, once you save, it automatically does everything for you, so you don't actually have to manually build it. There might be a setting for IntelliJ to do that, but for now, you can do that. So that's kind of a nice little thing. Another quick tip is, in both my text writer here, I accidentally put in an uppercase. So method names in classes in Java should be lowercase. Classes are uppercase. So really, it should be write text like this. And I could probably just, there's a way to refactor easily, but I'll just go ahead and manually do it. So we're going to have write text here, and then in fancy writer we're going to do write text here, and then my hello world, we're going to do write text here. So I changed it all, build again, and for back here, so refresh, still works, no errors, so we're good. Just in case, we'll go ahead and stop, restart it too, make sure we didn't do any problems. Okay, we're still good. So I'm going to go back to fancy writer. I'm just going to take this out for now, and control F9 to build. You can see here now it's good. All right, another thing I wanted to talk about is just a few hotkeys that are kind of helpful. So if you're in the text writer here, and let's say I wanted to add in another, let's say I wanted to add in something that implements this text writer, there is ways of doing that. You can, if you hit Alt Enter, you can add, you can go to implementation, you can convert to class, you can create test, implement interface. So if you do implement interface, it'll bring up this implement interface, and then I can type something like, I don't know, super writer, and you can also put the destination package. You can just click OK here. You can even ask you like if you want to go ahead and implement the method. I can have the override or not. I'll just uncheck it, click OK. So it does everything for you. So now here's my class. I didn't have to kind of create the class manually. Now if I did create the class manually, you can see here if I delete it. So we know that interfaces have to implement the classes have to implement the interface. So what I could do here is I can hit Control I, and that'll bring up this window, the same window we saw before, and I can click OK, and then it goes ahead and adds it in. So that's just another quick tip of something that's a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this for now. So I'm going to delete my super writer. I don't need it. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're in your class here, if I ever am writing something and I type in fancy and I do write text, I can hit Control P on the keyboard and that'll tell you kind of a quick hint of what's supposed to be in there. Obviously here's a string, so we can type in a string and that'll work. So Control P is another little hotkey that you can use. One other thing to do, so let's create a test on this. So we can go to the file, new class test, but one easier way to do that, and there's always more than one way to do this in IntelliJ, is we can put our cursor over the class and then hit Alt Enter again, and this time we can do create test. And that'll ask us like what we want to name the test file, destination packages. We can set up the before and after tests for setup and teardown with the annotations. We can also select like a basic method for our test. So let's just check mark that. We'll click OK, and here is our test file, kind of all ready to go for us. Now you can set up in IntelliJ some defaults, some intelligent defaults. Since we're in Spring, obviously this we probably want to add some more Spring testing in here, but it's kind of cool that's in there. Now once you create you can kind of get an idea when you create a Spring Initializer project, it gives you like a basic test that has nothing in it, has run with in a Spring Boot test. So you can use this, but it's really nice to be able to just quickly create a test. So let's create a really basic test here, and I have some notes, but I'm going to look at to make sure I have it right here. So the first thing you need to do is we're going to do a run with, and we're going to do spring runner dot class, and if it doesn't find it, we should be able to add it. And we're also going to do web MVC test, and we're going to add hello world dot class, the class file that we just did. Now here it is. I think it found it. So sometimes if it finds it, you just hit Alt Enter. Sometimes if it doesn't find it, then you might have to add it manually to the import. So what it does is it adds another import statement in here, so we don't have to like manually go and find it. So this tells us we're going to run with Spring Runner, and we're going to use the MVC test because we are using Spring, and we have a server, a GET server with a RESTful endpoint. So we're going to take a look at it there. And then one other thing I want to do is we're going to add in another annotation called context configuration. And in here, we're going to add in classes. And that classes is going to be an object here. And we're going to put in all the name of the classes we're using. So we're going to fancywriter.class, hello world.class, and regular writer.class. And once again, if it doesn't find it, make sure you correct any misspellings. So this is the basics of the test here. Now we're going to do one other thing. We're going to auto wire, and we're going to use something called mock MVC. And I'm kind of going fast through here, but this is a part of Mockito. So if we look at our imports up here, you can see here. Well, this mock MVC is through the org Spring Framework Test Web Servlet mock MVC, but we'll see how we can also use something called Mockito to do what we need to do. So now we have the mock MVC here, and this is our class. We're gonna just do the test happy. So we're going to test the happy path of this. And so we're going to do MVC. So we're trying to get what our purpose here is we're going to mock an actual attempt at connecting to our web service, grabbing the GET, because we're doing HTTP GET, and we're going to look at the output and make sure it matches what we expect it matches. So we're going to do result here, and we're going to do a few tests. Result, and once again Alt Enter, and we're going to call it result, and we're going to do this dot mock MVC dot perform. We're going to use a class called get, and this is a part of the Spring Framework Mock MVC Request Builders class. So once again, we'll do Alt-Enter. And you can see right here it's complaining that we aren't handling the exceptions. So we're going to do throws exception. We're going to hit Tab there, and that's going to make sure it adds it to the imports. So you can sometimes hit Tab, sometimes you can hit Alt-Enter. Then we're just going to check a few things. We're going to do and do. We're going to just print it on the screen. Once again, Alt-Enter to add it in. We're going to expect that the status, and once again, Alt-Enter, is okay. And finally, we're going to just return. This is going to return whatever the web server returns. So in this case, it should return the same thing. If we open up our web browser again, it should return this text, which is still running. And so we can do here assert equals, and we're going to do result.get response.get content as string, and then we're going to basically take this test. This is what we expect to come back, and we're going to check it. So that should be it. We got all our imports in. We have everything we need in for right now, and we'll use Mockito in a minute, but let's go ahead and just run test happy. So you can right click, run test happy, and cool. So the big green bar down here means it passed, so that's good thing. If we scroll up, we can see we did a print, so we could see what it's doing. It's doing a get to slash, and the response in the body was hi Eric fancy text. That was what we expected. That's what matched. That was good. So everything's fine there. Now, obviously, that's maybe just the perfect path there. But what happens if our object? What happens if our fancy text or fancy writer was changed in some way? Well, let's say if this was a little bit more dynamic and we wanted to test different scenarios. So obviously, this isn't going to work. This is just pretty much just showing us what we saw. So if we can go here, we can comment out this context configuration. And by the way, another nice I should call it a hotkey to get between the two is we can do Control-Shift-T. And so what Control-Shift-T does is it takes you from the test back to the original class. So I can actually go back the other way too. If I hit Control-Shift-T again, I'm back at the class. Control-Shift-T, I'm back here. So now I'm back at the Hello World class. You can see here I have these two text writers and a text writer fancy. So we can do this. We can copy this. And by the way, this could be one criticism, and we can maybe in a different video I'll show you this, but we're doing setter injection in here. But if you wanted something a little bit more fine-tuned in your testing, you probably want to actually do dependency injection on your constructor. That's if we had like a public hello world, kind of like I showed you before, and then we had hi like text writer s here, and then you did fancy equals s, something like this. This would be kind of a considered constructor injection. And then what you could do is you can really finely tune what this text writer s is coming in, and then do different tests based on what's being passed in here. For the purposes of the video, we won't show this because it does get a little confusing when you have these different qualifiers. There's something called primary, which is another way of doing this without qualifiers. We might look at that later. I could show you that now real quickly. So we're not going to run the test. Let's say instead of having these qualifiers here, so I'm going to comment out the qualifiers. And instead of having these qualifiers here, I'm going to go to Fancy Writer, and I'm going to put right here primary. And what that means is that this is going to be the primary one. We actually don't even need this qualifier right here. This is going to be the primary class it uses instead of using the qualifier. So what's going to happen is that it knows, since this is primary, it's going to use this one. And it's not going to get confused with the wiring and everything that you did before. So if we run this, let's say here we can build project. We can actually make sure it built correctly. We go back here and we run it. Yep, still works just the way we thought it would be. If we change this to regular and we build again, you see it built, and it's still showing the same text because it's still on primary. So we would have to then change the primary here. Let's see here, and make this primary, and we'll take it, and it's mad because I haven't hit Alt Enter to actually add in the symbol. Oops, let me make sure I have it in there. There it is. And then I have to go back to the regular writer, fancy writer. I'll take it out of this one. Oops. Back to hello world. And now I'll run it. I'll build again. Now it's all uppercase. So we just changed the primary from one to the other instead of using qualifiers. So that's another way to do it. We'll let's go and just put it back to the way it was. So we're going to put qualifier here, qualifier here. Go back to fancy writer. We'll take the primary out. We'll go back here. And by the way, I can just hit Control N and just type in. That's another hotkey. So if I want to get to the regular writer, I can just type the name in and hit tab, and it just goes there really quickly. That way I don't have to just use my mouse all the time. So I can go like this. So now it's back to the way it was. And if I build again, and I refresh, and I go back to fancy, and I build, gotta make sure I build. There it goes. Now it's back to fancy text using qualifier. So let's go back to our test. Control Shift T. Back to our test. And now we want to see if we can go ahead and kind of mock up the actual text writer to see what happens if we have different values coming into the text writer. So we'll go Control Shift T again. I'm going to just copy and paste both of these. I'm going to Control Shift again, Control Shift T, and I'm going to copy and paste them. And by the way, it says, hey, this qualifier, what is this? You click OK and it adds it. But instead of doing auto-wired, we're going to do mock bean. And what that's saying is it's going to make this mock bean. So for both of these. And now what we can do is we can use when. And when is a way that we can say when fancy.write text has something like, and this has to match exactly here. Go back, Control Shift T, this hi Eric. When we see this hi Eric here, string, obviously. And by the way, this is using Mockito right here, so we're going to hit Alt Enter. So when we see this string, we're going to then return a different text. So instead of returning hi Eric fancy text like here, we're just going to do hi Eric, I don't know, mock text. And then we're going to expect it to return this text. Now obviously if we had something more dynamic and it did some more things, it would do it differently. So now we're basically changing the way that this fancy write text works. So instead of, in the fancy writer, instead of just returning, see here, just instead of returning, concatenating whatever string we passed in fancy text, now we're saying in the hello world, in this test case, instead of returning, concatenating the string with hi Eric, it's going to just return hi Eric mock test. So that should change. So now we're expecting this text instead. So let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. All right, so it still passed. So if you look here, the body passed. It's big green. So we're good. So now obviously if I put in 1 here and I run the test again, it fails. So now it says, hey, expected hierarch mock text 1, but it actually got hierarch mock test because this doesn't match this. So you can see a way you can actually mock it and be able to test this going forward. So I hope this helps some really basics on testing. Obviously, this as your applications gets more complicated, you really want to dive into Mockito and the test suite that Spring has to do a lot more sophisticated tests, which maybe I'll show you in future videos. If you guys like these videos, please leave a comment below and please click that subscribe button. If you really like it, click that bell button. Thanks.